morning, everybody. Welcome to this morning session right after the plenary session. So it's always important to say a few words in advance of the actual panelists speaking. I won't give an introduction. I'm Yasin Anwar. I'll be the moderator for this session. We'll have specialists who have already got the background that you already have in your brochure, so I won't go through the background of each individual because of time constraints. Let me first, as was done in the previous session, first go through some housekeeping items that I'm asked to talk to everybody about, is that the QR code, and I have to read this because I'm not very familiar with the housekeeping rules. QR code forward featured on your badge links to the official Telegram channel of the Astana International Financial Center. So you will stay updated on all the latest information regarding the conference. Also, login and passwords to Wi-Fi, press releases, photos. There will also be text broadcasts from the panel sessions on the Telegram channel. Also, you can find all information, sheet CFI, in the special application events ROCKS, a platform for communicating and connecting with conference participants. You can download this by the QR code from the screen. Simultaneous translation into Kazakh, Russian, and English is provided for the convenience of the audience. For your safety in case of any emergency or fire, kindly note that the emergency exits can be found in the mini atriums behind the blocks C3.4, C3.3, and C3.3 and C3.2, and near the Zebra Coffee. And of course, we would like to extend our sincere appreciation to the conference golden sponsors, Visa, Freedom Broker, and Kaz Minerals companies for their cooperation and support. So now that I've got that housekeeping item out of the way, let's begin with our show. Just before I introduce our welcome address speaker as well as a panelist, I just want to add a couple of words for just 1 or 2 minutes, is that some of you might have heard the plenary session in the beginning. This is a very important area. We have faced global financial crisis in 2008. We faced all sorts of other crises. We faced the pandemic, which gave us indication that nature has a way of controlling us, even though there was some positive 17% reduction in emissions were recorded during that session. Then we had last year, of course, the Silicon Valley Bank collapse, Republic, and so forth. So we had numerous kinds of exogenous shocks that were felt around the world. However, all these pale in comparison to the kind of existential threat we face from climate change and climate risk. We all know that that's why we're here. And to make sure that we comply with our ESG goals and those set by the United Nations for carbon neutrality, et cetera, for the next few decades, we must face a lot of challenges and a lot of impediments also in coming up with transition finance and the challenges we face to make sure that the sustainable investments are managed properly by the globe. And it's important we face this. So our panelists who will be talking about each one of these areas will be giving us a little insight on how we can face these challenges. And we'll have other sessions also that will provide this kind of information. So before I go into the exact panelists themselves, I'd like to first introduce to our audience our welcome speaker, Mr. Baghdad Ameriev, who is the president of the Turkey Investment Fund. He will say a few words to open the session. So, Mr. Ameriev, please.
Yeah. Thank you very much. Good morning, dear participants. It's a distinct pleasure for me to be here with you today, and also the theme of this session is also close to our agenda, to our activity as a fund. The Turkic Investment Fund is a newly established financial body, a mechanism of Turkic speaking states. You know, what countries are Turkic-speaking states. Azerbaijan, Kazakhstan, Kyrgyzstan, Uzbekistan, Turkmenistan, Turkey, and Hungary. You know that we are living today in not only a globalized world, also a regionalism, strong process of regionalism is also going on. And Turkic nations has been emerged recently, let's say during the last decades, as a new political reality, as a new entity. Of course, Turkic states have always been there, and strong nations, strong economies, but this time, during the last decade, they have united more, and they established their own political organization, which is the Organization of Turkic States. And one of aims of this fund, establishment of this fund, is to promote the economic cooperation between our countries, to assist, support our entrepreneurs, to make joint projects to strengthen the economic integrity between our countries. So this fund is a new institution, and recently, this year, it became functional. The main aim, as I mentioned, is to promote our intra-regional trade, finance our joint projects, particularly those of micro, small, and medium-sized enterprise, cooperate and co-finance with international and regional finance institutions, financial institutions, support the expansion of transport and logistic chains, support the creation and modernization of the physical and digital infrastructure, including the public-private partnership, support development projects in the fields of mutual interest, including industrial production, infrastructure, transport, agriculture. Every sphere of the economy is covered by the activity, will be covered by the activity of this fund. And of course, this fund is at your disposal. I mean, our entrepreneurs, our business community. So today, I would like to thank the organizers for inviting us. By the way, with me today, Mr. Ramil Babayev, General Director of the Turkey Investment Fund. Also, he's also happy to work. Actually, he'll be responsible for all our operational activities. Прошу любить и жаловать, как по-русски говорят. I would like to thank Mr. Yassin for giving me this chance to introduce our fund in a very short way, as well as organizers for giving us this chance. Turkey Investment Fund, as the main financial institution of the Turkic states, now became functional, and it will commence its operational activities very soon. We are planning to commence our operational activities 1st of November. Our fund is based in Istanbul, but will be actively involved in all our member states. Thank you very much. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Mr. Baghdad. You've touched on a couple of very important points. One point I picked up was very critical, is intra-regional trade, cooperation. That's the hallmark of any successful regional area. And I just want to mention one point, is Central Asia republics and South Asia are the least integrated regions in the world. ASEAN region is about 24.5%. Europe and United States, or NAFTA, is about 65%. So there's some opportunity here that we need to collaborate and promote that intra-regional trade to ensure that the exogenous shocks that were felt, like in the global financial crisis, we don't face them again. So there's a huge opportunity. So thank you for pointing that out. On that score, I want to just highlight a little bit about what you may have heard, that Green Investment Principles, of which I chair here for Central Asia, is an important organization that promotes precisely that cooperation with the Central Asian Republic states. And we've done a great deal of work on this. Our team here in AIFC with Anastana has done a tremendous job in supporting that effort. The kind of work we've involved in that Central Asia has indicated that, according to this report that was published earlier this year, about $2.7 billion of worth of new opportunities exist, with Kazakhstan and Uzbekistan having about 1.3 billion of that. So please look at the report. It's on our website for Green Investment Principles. You can access that. It gives you a whole lot of data and information on how the Central Asian republics can play a pivotal role in promotion of these ESG standards. Okay? Now, I know we've got a panel of speakers that I want to go through quickly because we won't have much time. Our first panel speaker is the speaker from EBRD. We've already gotten information in the previous panel about what EBRD does, so I'm not going to go into that. My panelist, Mr. Askar, who's with the EBRD, has been with the organization for some time. And my question relates to Mr. Askar on how does EBRD act in the region to support or suggest support for sustainable development programs, volumes, successful cases. If you can cite some, that would be very helpful. And what are the incentive measures that EBRD has outlined to incentivize the participants? If you can outline some of those plans as well for the region, we'll be very grateful.
Thank you, Anwar. It's my pleasure to be here. Let me start just to say a few words about EBRD, and then I'll proceed to answer your question. First of all, EBRD is a multilateral financial institution that is owned by 69 governments, including the government of Kazakhstan. We are considered one of the largest foreign direct investors in Kazakhstan outside of oil and gas sector, with more than 10 billion euro of investments since start of our operations more than 30 years ago in more than 300 projects. And current bank portfolio stands at around 2.9 billion euro in more than 120 projects. Those are active projects that are currently in our portfolio. And 70% of that is mainly in infrastructure and energy sector, 25% is about industry and retail sector, and around 5% is in financial institutions and banks. Now, this portfolio very much reflects the structure of Kazakh economy, which is dominated by state-owned enterprises operating those infrastructure and energy assets, and with relatively shallow private sector and banking sector. And promoting private sector development is at the core of EBRD mandate globally and in Kazakhstan in particular. So one of the key pillars or one of the key components of EBRD strategy in Kazakhstan is supporting the country on green pathway to carbon neutrality and climate resilience. And the bank has been active in this respect in multiple ways. For starters, historically, the bank was at the foundation of the country's renewables framework, where we provided assistance to basically draw the laws and share kind of the risk profile so that it is attractive for investments. And it's been I think without kind of exaggeration, a tremendous success coming from zero kind of renewables back in 2013 to more than 10% of generation coming from renewables this year. And we put our money where our mouth is. Our current renewable portfolio in the country tops 350 million euro in 12 projects. And we see that Kazakhstan is making good strides and progress to achieving this ambitious goal of coming to 50% generation from renewables by 2050. And so that brings me to another kind of venue where EBRD interacts in the country. One of the key pillars of promoting green agenda is promotion of sustainable finance. And this is, I guess, the topic of this panel. And again, the EBRD uses a range of instruments to provide financing and know-how for sustainable lending through different financial institutions, including banks, microfinance organizations, and leasing companies. So in 2 years ago, the bank approved what is called Kazakhstan Green Economy Financing Facility, abbreviated as GEF, for $150 million to support energy efficiency, renewable energy, resource efficiency, circular economy, and climate resilient investments in the country. So pretty much anything green that you can find, and the bank is willing to finance, and the funding is channeled through our partner banks. So, and this framework is built on success of a $30 million pilot that was fully allocated back in 2020 to 21, and again, is aimed to scale up our intermediated green financing and improve skills of local financial institutions in identifying and assessing, all sorts of green investments and opportunities. So to date, under this framework, the bank approved $50 million worth of investments, and including $30 million loan signed just this last summer with Bank Center Credit. And these investments, they are accompanied by technical assistance packages, again, to support capacity building and many other ways. So on a separate note, since March 2022, again, that's another venue where we interact to promote green agenda in the country. We have been active with the Agency for Regulation and Development, basically, of financial markets, basically the regulator, to accelerate cooperation on ESG and greening of the financial system. And in collaboration with other financial institutions, this work resulted in adoption of a framework for disclosure of ESG activities by commercial banks. A big block of work is related to policy assistance to Astana International Financial Center to formulate green finance instruments and policies. And to that end, again, the bank provided a technical assistance package, I think it was maybe 3 or 4 years ago. As a result of this work, first green bonds were issued at AX and KASE by Damu Fund, followed by a number of other prominent issuers. So going forward, we plan to continue this work. We plan to continue to increase investments in Kazakhstan and provide policy engagement. And as an example of one of the ways in enabling this is kind of tapping on the kind of ESG-minded investment communities, for example, through if it is possible to issue infrastructure bonds by the 3 largest cities in the country. So we know that Almaty is working with UNDP and us as well on preparing green bonds to finance priority infrastructure. And there's no reason why this couldn't be replicated by two other cities like Astana or Shymkent and broader into the country. So this is one of the kind of venues where we see as kind of we could engage. So I guess I'll stop at that.
Well, thank you very much. Very concisely done. And I was pleased to hear one thing. They always say that actions speak louder than words. And you mentioned a couple of figures that I was intrigued by. From a zero base, you've said that 850 million in financing of renewables had taken by EBRD, which is very good and excellent. And that's the kind of example that we like to see all institutions, multilaterals particularly, because you have to play a pivotal role in all the areas around the world, whether EBRD or World Bank. So thank you very much for that contribution. The same thing would be applying to the EDB, of course. EDB has a similar role in terms of financing these kind of projects to promote sustainable finance. And my question to our next panelist, Conrad, would be very similar. Could you highlight some of your successes in terms of sustainable finance, what you have, what your focus is, what you've achieved in terms of successes, and what is your vision going forward in terms of implementing this sustainable finance strategy?
Thank you, Yasin. Dobre utro. Thank you very much for the opportunity to be speaking today and with so distinguished panelists. And I think as an introduction, we have been hearing today a little bit more also from transition finance for the sustainability efforts at the banks and the investment community in Kazakhstan and Central Asia. They're going to be pivotal for the transformation of our countries in the region. And that's also how we see in our mandates to support the achievement of the NDCs of the countries, their decarbonization strategies. So the bank, and also a few words of our institution. Our organization is based here in Almaty, in Kazakhstan. We have 6 member countries. We are formed by the ex-countries of the Soviet Union. So we have Russia, Tajikistan, Armenia, Kyrgyzstan, Belarus, and of course Kazakhstan. They all form a very united community of, we support the private institutions with project finance. So when we look for projects in our countries, in our member countries, we have this arm, private arm, to support the achievement of the climate targets of our member countries through private finance, so through project finance. So whenever public finance is not sufficient, or it needs also support from the private entrepreneurs and the large organizations as well that are established in the countries of our member countries, this is where we come in and we provide loans and finance to those organizations. So we also foster this other side of the equation, which is we understand very importantly for the achievement of the targets of our countries, which is private capital as well, given from our shareholders, but to the private financiers as well. And also I have some slides here that contextualize a little bit more of our bank. So we are a regional bank. We're not so large at EBRD, but are very good partners of EBRD, ADB, World Bank. But we are like an IFC, like from World Bank. We're like a private arm of, let's say, the MDB's communities, right? So we have been operating the countries for more than 18 years with very successful large infrastructure projects. So we are most likely more core focus on core infrastructure or critical infrastructure that we look for even if those are more hard to abate sectors, even if those are more climate or environmentally sensitive sectors. This has been our legacy of investments since almost those 20 years of operations. And that means also how we're looking for transition finance, and we understand how this is very critical for the achievement of those climate goals of our member countries. Therefore, we cannot just not invest anymore in a given more polluting or more brown sector or more hard to abate sector. We understand that we have a pivotal and a very crucial role to transform with energy efficiency and to transform, for example, here in Kazakhstan, we also have still many coal plants and coal power facilities. Those facilities are very important to be transitioned. So we also, whenever I have opportunity, I also call for action for all the MDBs and other banks to not finance any more coal. But of course, greenfield projects, we should avoid doing this going forward. But the brownfield projects, existing facilities, they really need to be supported for transition. And even that means to be like gas, from coal to gas. We're having some, I'm going to also show some examples. We need to do that transition in emerging and developing countries. We cannot just shut the door and have the social impact of the workers in this community from one day to the other. So this is also how the bank sees its operations going forward with those critical sectors. 7 billion charter capital. We have more than 16 billion of investment portfolio. Roughly 15% plus is on green assets, we can call safely as, and also, of course, climate. The majority are climate related, so with renewable energy, RES, and renewable efficiency as well. Energy efficiency is something very critical for our portfolio, and of course, our expertise in such industries and sectors. And here is also a very interesting point that when we look and break down to Central Asia, when we are talking about climate, or specifically SDG 7, and why do I emphasize, of course, energy is always the bulk, and we see in terms of emissions is always the one of the top priority sectors that we have across the countries here in the region, not necessarily the first one, but usually in the second, the third place as well. The point is that when we look for climate investments from the MDB communities, last year it was the most, let's say the highest investments, top at like 61 billion to low income and emerging economies, according to the World Bank classification. But this is roughly 4% dedicated to our region, Central Asia, or basically $2.6 billion. So this is not enough for how much the capital is needed, the international influx of capital is going to be needed to 2050 if we have the conditional indices of the member countries with the international community support. So this is also how I always try to highlight co-financing is critical for the success of this region, and we, as also a regional bank partnering with EBRD and the others, we always call, and of course the national development banks as well. This is a call for action and more interest for the opportunities. That's how I understand as well. We don't have much integrated countries yet. I think the panel, the moderator said this before. But this is also this is an opportunity for us to unite. This is also the mandate of the bank to connect the countries, not just on traditional sectors, but also on climate-oriented endeavors. And on the other hand, when we see not just on climate, but specifically for SDG 7, so when we see for renewable energy, specifically RES, roughly from 22 years accumulated roughly $4 billion. And that's basically not even 2% of the world share accumulated during this period. If we look here, some examples, the breakdown is roughly 43% that went to Kazakhstan, and then Tajikistan 23%, Armenia and the Caucasus 15%, Belarus 13%, and Kyrgyzstan 13%. And usually in the back, let's say 10 years ago or 20 years ago in the beginning of the 2000s, much more for hydropower, as we have the example for Kyrgyzstan, Tajikistan, but again, this is also needs to shift, of course, to more solar and, of course, wind power generation. How the bank is also looking to support this transition to more and also capture more influx of capital. We are, as you also asked, how are the plans and the strategic vision of the bank? We're almost ending our current strategic cycle in the next year. So in 2026 to 2031, we're going to be starting our new strategic cycle, and we're currently studying how to be aligned with the current methodologies of the MDBs, the global community of MDBs, to be fully aligned with the Paris Agreement. Right now, as we are not having this formally in the bank yet, but our portfolio as a study we made is roughly 33%, because we still have some coal projects. We're still considering coal projects, but of course we wanted to transition those going forward. No more greenfield projects, at least from our institutional perspective, to do that more. But in this next strategic cycle, we of course will have the ambition to be 100%. Many MDBs already are 100%, or they are at least have a target to be in 2030 or 2026 or so on, to be 100% mark. So this is also very important as we understand our contribution for the climate targets of the member countries. And here just briefly how, and also emphasize of course the GAP, and I think it's also very important, the principles for all the banking community in Central Asia to be aligned and be interested to follow those very important position statement, and of course follow those principles in their culture and their strategy with the GAP. The bank has also observer status on the CCC. We also have part of the Financing Common now, and the of course, the PRB, so the United Nations PRB, so the Principles for Responsible Banking. And we are also rated by international ESG rating companies like RepRisk and MSCI. And here is basically just, as I said before, 1.6 accumulated portfolio on green and renewable projects. The very important point here is the growth and the trend. In the last, let's say, 4 or 5 years, since 2018, we have been growing almost more than 150% on our share of our green investments. Primarily driven by, of course, we always have the energy sector, but also we are looking more for what we can do in, let's say, sustainable transportation, what we can also do more on circular economy. So we also need to have those with, as also said before here, technical assistance, so to become more bankable projects on the private sector as well. This is how the bank can also support these, those achievements for the region. And okay, this is just an overview, but this is the most interesting slide in my last remarks. Some successes or cases that we have been working on the sustainable finance in our projects and our portfolio. The first one is from exactly what I was saying in the beginning, this transition of finance from coal to gas. And in the future, probably we can see if this is affordable, if it's bankable, if the economic conditions and on the grid's infrastructure will also sustain to be economically feasible. So what are the mechanisms that are going to be supporting to get on at least a blue or especially a green hydrogen from gas? That can be the next step. But as I said before, we need to do this in phases. So that's what the bank is investing 400 million for this transition project that we can call interim transition. There is also a very hard debate on that transition finance should consider gas or not. In our perspective for the moment, this is an intermediate solution that we also understand in our member countries this is necessary. Maybe if I were in a developing country, that will be a different perspective. And the point is that we're going to be able to lower down the emissions at 42% from the existing capacity of this coal plant. So an additional modernization as well of the plant for more 500 megawatts to be generated. That equates to roughly 2.5% of the non-renewable, as gas is non-renewable, energy installed capacity of Kazakhstan. The second one is the construction of a hydropower in Kulanak, so HPPP in Kyrgyzstan. This is a key investment mega project of the bank. Our institution, we look for at least 3 to 5, but the formal number is 3 key investment mega projects per year. So those are very large infrastructure projects and can be, of course, PPPs and cross-border. So this is how we see to integrate the member states. This is an example here that we have in Kyrgyzstan. It will also reduce 346 tons of CO2 equivalent and provide more 100 megawatts of energy generation with just, I would say just, of course, 44 million of investments. But that's the important point, how it represents relative to the installed capacity of the country is 3%. So one project like this, 44 million in our stake from the bank, this is how we can see the additionality and how we can snowball this for other projects. So how we can try to see more of those projects and similar effect. 3% here, 3% there, 5% there. We're going to be scaling up. So the volume, the quantity is also very important to see when they are affordable in those countries. And that resonates basically from 78% from what has been driven from the last 22 years on the previous slide that I showed here before, from the SDG 7 foreign investments to the country. So those almost 4 billion across all the countries, and 44% is for just Kyrgyzstan. That equates from what is compared to the all international investments during that time. So that's also again a call for action for international community to also consider the opportunities in Kyrgyzstan and Central Asia. And the last one is also what is not yet, let's say, disclosed. It's still on negotiations, but is about to be unleashed very soon. Wind power plant in Kazakhstan, 150 plus megawatts capacity to lower more than 500 CO2 equivalent of emissions for the country. 100 million project that equates to 3%, again, a roughly estimation of 3% of the installed capacity on the renewable energy infrastructure of the country, on grid especially. And that's also in the important point. It equates to 10% of the existing installed capacity of wind generation of the country. So that's even more emblematic, so it's 10%. So we have at least more 2, 3, 4 wind farms in the country that will scale up to more than 50% plus given the existing baseline of the existing installed capacity. I don't know if someone came from and landed in the airport in Astana. I was landing, I saw some wind turbines in the horizon when approaching the airport. So this is how we wanted to see more and going forward in this region, even here in Astana, not just remote, and then we have the transmission lines to go and supply to the other cities and regions. But of course, this needs to be selected and approached very carefully. And this is basically 0.29 times Again, compared to all the international accumulated flows of international investments in the last 22 years to this modality, to this energy vector wind specifically. So this is, again, how it's important to partner and consider a local or regional development bank and a regional institution with this international community, and of course the other banks are here like the ADB, EBRD, and the private financiers as well. So this is our strategic vision, as I said, focus more on transition finance as we have this very good expertise, and of course looking to be very aligned with Paris Agreement going forward. That's our target objective to be formalized in the next strategic cycle till 2031. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you, Conrad. Very nicely done. Lots of numbers one can digest. I have a couple of comments. You mentioned about fossil fuels that you're still financing, and about Central Asia depends about 90% plus still on its energy needs from fossil fuels. It's interesting, raised a question for me. The Central Asia has a growth rate in the last 20 years of about 6.2%, as the developing versus the developing economies globally had about, the last 20 years, about 5.2%, and the global growth rates with all the countries about 2.8%. So it's going to be challenging to see how you achieve those same growth rates given the transitionary period that you're going to be facing in the Central Asia and the globe. And transition finance is one that I'm very particularly interested in terms of how this is going to be met by reaching the 250, 260 goals that everybody has. Transition finance is huge. There's no one number that one can pick on, but I have a number that in one province in China alone is going to be about $2 trillion. So if you expand that multiplier effect to the globe, you can imagine it's trillions and trillions of dollars that will be required for transition finance between now and 2050 or 60, whichever target that you're looking at. So there's a huge opportunity here for this conversion. I know Mongolia, which is 90% energy needs are from fossil fuels. They just launched it with IFC, a $60 million green bond to fund green projects. So they're in the process, and all these other collaboration with multilaterals is going to help in this conversion over the coming years to meet those ESG standards and towards carbon neutrality. So thank you very much. It's very usefully done. Just to shift gears a little bit, I'm going to go next to the panelist that is in a different field altogether, is the mortgage refinance business. And that's our panelist, Marat, is an expert on that. She's involved in as a CFO for the company here in Uzbekistan, and it's a very, very important area because that is an engine of growth for any economy. And I'd like to ask a question of Marat, which is really related to green bonds and how you see the issuance of these green bonds to support the business that you're in, as well as how Uzbekistan's sustainable finance opportunities will develop over the coming years. Marat?
Thank you, Mr. Anwar. Thank you for AFC for having me here today. Firstly, let me start with answering to the second part of your question, because compared to Kazakhstan, Uzbekistan has just recently started dealing with green economy, green growth, and ESG matters. So within the program, within its strategy for 2022-26, the government of Uzbekistan in 2022 developed and adopted a program for green transition and ensuring green growth. So within this program, last year in October 2023, the national green taxonomy was developed. So shortly after that, the first Uzbekistan first sovereign green Eurobonds were issued in London Stock Exchange. The size of the issuance was 4.3 trillion Uzbek sums. For you to have an understanding, this is roughly 335 million USD equivalent issuance. So the bonds were for 3 years, and interestingly to say that as Uzbekistan is a very high interest rate area, the issuance was for 3 years at 16.25%. So these are developments which came from the government at this stage. if we shift our focus to our company, we are the single institution who provides long-term facilities for mortgage purposes in the mortgage market of Uzbekistan. Recently we have just also started developing and committing to sustainability financing, and of course according to the world statistics, well over 40% of energy consumption comes to the households. So that's why we, by addressing our one of our main goals and objectives of providing affordable housing to vulnerable groups, we have decided to shift our vision to the green mortgage as well. So that's why, of course, we have developed and also introduced our local regulations with kind assistance of Green Finance Center of AIFC. Right after this very interesting event, next week we are going to issue and place our first inaugural green bonds with the size of 50 billion Uzbek sums. This is roughly $4 million. Of course, the size is very minuscule compared to Kazakhstan, which has well over 1 billion size sustainable finance instruments. But these are very small steps, initial steps that we are taking now. The proceeds from the issuance, of course, will be provided to green mortgage, and if we dive into more details, of course, this is for green renovation purposes. The country has just recently developed green construction standards, but it is still in the stage of developing certification system. And World Bank Group is assisting to the government with development of this system. So at this stage, we have decided to go for renovation and in assistance with our partners, developed green renovation web platform, which is available for all stakeholders in Uzbekistan. So any end borrower, individual who wants to receive green renovation loan under our program can go to this web tool and go through the underwriting system, which will at the end confirm if they are eligible for receiving green renovation loan under our green renovation loan program. So this is the current stage of green bond issuance development in the country, and we are proud to say that we are going to be the first institution who will issue and place green bonds in Tashkent Stock Exchange. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Marat. Very nicely done. I was interested to hear you say about your first green bond that you launched. It was at $4 million, albeit small, but a journey of 1,000 miles starts with the first step. So very nicely done. And I look forward to hearing more about this mortgage finance industry because it is going to be vital for the growth of the economy. Thank you. I'm going to shift next to our next panelist, who's Natalia, who is with the chairperson of the KSC Clearing Center. And I'm very interested to hear how that center evaluates for reporting purposes, as well as how you see your vision on ESG-related bonds that were issued by KSC platform over the last year or so. I think there are about 20 issues that were launched. And I'd be interested to hear, going forward, how you see these instruments being issued for sustainable finance, as well as your view on reporting procedures, because reporting by central banks, of course, is somewhere, it's not a mandatory requirement, but some banks are considered. I know last year when I was here, a panelist, the deputy governor of the Central Bank of Kazakhstan, mentioned that they were planning to make it mandatory by a certain date. which is a big step. And I know in State Bank of Pakistan also, they've already started reporting it, but not mandatory. So it's step by step, every country is moving in that direction. I'd like to hear your thoughts on that too. So Natalia, the floor is yours.
Спасибо, господин Анвар. Я буду, если позволите, расскажу о рынке устойчивого финансирования на казахстанской фондовой бирже по-русски. В этом году и вот буквально в этом месяце исполняется ровно 9 лет с тех пор, как казахстанская фондовая биржа присоединилась к инициативе ООН «Устойчивые биржи». И тогда, 9 лет назад, мы понимали, что для казахстанского финансового рынка и биржевого рынка, в том числе, понятие устойчивого финансирования и устойчивых финансов является не таким чем-то теоретическим и на практике на самом деле неприменимым. Казахстанский рынок был не единственным таковым, а, наверное, на тот момент, в 2015 году, таких рынков, особенно в стане развивающихся государств, было большинство. Вот в этом году буквально Всемирная федерация бирж, участником которой является казахстанская фондовая биржа, выпустила отчет, посвященный прогрессу в развитии биржевой составляющей устойчивого финансирования. И вот как раз был охвачен период с 2015 года по настоящее время. Мы видим, что прогресс в биржевой сфере выглядит достаточно внушительным. Почти более 80% бирж уделяют все больше внимания тому, чтобы действительно формировать отчетность об устойчивом развитии тех компаний, которые на их биржах проходят листинг, размещают ценные бумаги. Также мы видим, что почти 100% отмечают важность и нужность предложения ESG-продуктов именно в биржевой сфере, причем около 45% из опрошенных бирж говорят о том, что видят высокий спрос инвесторов на устойчивые проекты, на зеленые проекты и, конечно, большой спрос на более качественное и детальное раскрытие нефинансовой информации об устойчивом развитии. Ну и вот на этом слайде показано, что сейчас 34 биржи уже предлагают свои площадки для устойчивого финансирования на биржевом рынке. На этом слайде мы показали, какие тренды есть в целом в биржевой инфраструктуре, связанные с устойчивым финансированием. На самом деле биржи видят себя в этом вопросе как инфраструктура, как площадки, на которых встречаются эмитенты и инвесторы, и эти площадки должны предлагать соответствующие инструменты и тем, и другим. И зачастую биржевые площадки являются новаторами и проводниками тех идей, которые существуют в мире, и местом, где и инвесторы, и эмитенты могут получить дополнительную информацию, научиться и взять какие-то новые продукты, которые они в свою жизнь могут внедрять. Так, в частности, вот среди биржевых трендов по-прежнему очень важным является вопрос раскрытия информации. Нам очень позитивно мы смотрим на то, что формируются международные стандарты раскрытия такой информации. Объясню почему. Вот фондовый рынок – это место, где любая практически компания может предложить свои ценные бумаги, то есть привлечь финансирование от неограниченного круга инвесторов. Для того, чтобы компании удалось продать свои ценные бумаги, и для того, чтобы инвестор смог эти ценные бумаги купить, компания должна качественно раскрыть информацию о себе, рассказать инвесторам не только о тех финансовых показателях, которые которые сложились, но и также о том, как и почему такие финансовые показатели у компании сложились, как у компании, какова стратегия компании, какова цепочка принятия решений, насколько компания ответственна не только в ведении собственного бизнеса, но и в социальных вопросах, вопросах корпоративного управления, вопросах влияние на окружающую среду. Это вот как раз все те сферы, которые покрывают принципы ESG, которыми, собственно, и являются для биржевого рынка вот понятие устойчивого финансирования. Также все больше бирж, и Казахстанская фондовая биржа не исключение, предлагают продукты, помимо того, что являются площадкой для размещения зеленых и других ESG-облигаций, также предлагают дополнительные продукты, такие как ESG-индексы, скоринги, квази-рейтингование, ну и, конечно, новые инструменты в виде производных и деривативов. И некоторые биржи идут дальше, и сами по себе, как организации, хозяйствующие субъекты, они принимают стратегию net zero, то есть стремятся быть устойчивыми не только как площадка для привлечения финансирования, но и как организация, как субъект бизнеса. Мои коллеги, Конрад в частности говорил, по-моему, о том, что формируется в Казахстане законодательство, регуляторная среда для развития устойчивого финансирования. Действительно так. Буквально пару лет назад был принят новый экологический кодекс, зеленая таксономия. Финансовый регулятор уделяет большое внимание построению регулирования именно для финансовых организаций. Появляется методология для раскрытия информации об ESG-рисках и ESG-перспективах для различных компаний, различных секторов. С точки зрения, здесь мы показали слайд, на котором Казахстанская фондовая биржа как бы в фокусе и в составе других бирж, какие основные блоки выделяет вот, в части устойчивого финансирования в своей деятельности. Первое – это то, о чем я уже сказала, это раскрытие информации. Это очень важный момент, очень важно для того, чтобы инвесторы могли увидеть и купить какой-то финансовый инструмент, эту информацию до него надо донести. Донести ее желательно в стандартизированном виде, так, чтобы у инвестора было понимание, как читать эту информацию, как ее использовать. Отсюда органично вытекает второй блок нашей деятельности Казахстанской фондовой биржи, который состоит в том, чтобы популяризировать и обучать эмитентов и инвесторов тому, что такое рынок устойчивых финансов, какие могут быть на нем продукты, как это работает, какие преференции те и другие могут получить от этого рынка. Вот мои коллеги из институтов развития говорили о том, что действительно экономика Казахстана в большей части представлена энергетическим сектором сейчас, и это сектор незеленых финансов преимущественно. Большой блок квазигосударственного сектора. И действительно, когда вот мы начали работать с 2015 года по раскрытию информации, с 2020 года по созданию площадки для привлечения финансирования, первыми эмитентами были именно институты развития. Мы очень благодарны, кстати, нашим коллегам из этих институтов и присутствующим здесь. Оба инвестбанка, международных инвестбанка являются эмитентами Казахстанской фондовой биржи, также Азиатский банк развития, Казахстанский институт развития присутствуют на нашей площадке. И именно они были пионерами в выпуске зеленых и других устойчивых облигаций, и они показали частным инвесторам и частным эмитентам, что этот путь в Казахстане есть, что он работает, и что это реально привлекать финансирование на открытом рынке для финансирования зеленых проектов. Вот на этом графике показана динамика того, как в Казахстане это сработало. На сегодняшний день мы зарегистрировали на своей площадке более $500 миллиона тенге суммарно выпуски облигаций, которые были посвящены зеленым проектам, гендерным проектам, социальным проектам и иным проектам устойчивого развития. Почти 500 миллиона тенге уже привлечено на нашей площадке. На сегодняшний день в списках Казахстанской фондовой биржи находится порядка 20 выпусков устойчивых облигаций, не только зеленых, как я сказала, и социальных, и иных устойчивых облигаций. И это действительно отрадно, но наверное, самым главным нашим достижением на сегодняшний момент мы считаем тот факт, что порядка 10 уже выпусков облигаций было в истории вот с 2020 года, облигаций малого и среднего бизнеса. Мы поддерживаем малый и средний бизнес на площадке КАСЕ не только при выпуске зеленых и иных устойчивых облигаций, но и в целом как сектор экономики, в котором заинтересована страна в целом. Мы заинтересованы в том, чтобы развивался малый и средний бизнес, чтобы диверсифицировалась экономика и чтобы у предпринимателей, которые занимаются таким развитием, было как можно больше источников для финансирования. У нас существует на КАСЕ специальная площадка, она называется «Альтернативная», где размещаются такие облигации. И вот как раз те 10 выпусков, о которых я говорила, это как раз вот компании, которые на эту площадку выходили. В частности, вот коллеги затрагивали вопрос о альтернативной энергии. В этом году, в конце прошлого года, разместилась компания на нашей площадке, которая привлекла 3 миллиона тенге именно на построение ветряных станций. Также через нашу площадку финансировались компании, которые привлекали деньги на строительство заводов по, например, выпуску экологичных удобрений и так далее. Ну и в заключение буквально тоже вот 2 слова хотела сказать о том, что группа Казахстанской фондовой биржи, в которую 2 организации входят, включая клиринговый центр, имеет собственную повестку устойчивого развития. Мы не только пытаемся строить инфраструктуру и площадку для выпуска зеленых финансов, мы также сами стремимся быть компанией устойчивой с высоким уровнем корпоративного управления и минимальным влиянием на экологию, окружающую среду. И вот здесь как раз наши цели представлены. На этом у меня все. Спасибо большое за внимание и за предоставленное слово.
Thank you, Natalia. I think you've outlined statistics and your operation in such a way that I think the entire audience is going to come knocking on your door to get some help, because you've touched on some very important areas about educating and bringing about an awareness to the public and on the success of your stock exchange. I was intrigued to see that you mentioned about 80% of your listed companies are compliant or looking at reporting, and your excellent success in your ESG bonds that you mentioned at the end was also very, very encouraging. So it's a great platform that you have hinted addressed that is used for investors to come and share information and to develop innovative products towards this effort. So, so it seems like Kazakhstan is really leading very nicely compared to many other countries in the world that still need to develop some of this expertise. So well done, and I congratulate you on that effort. Just to add a little bit, Green Investment Principles, GIP, is that I mentioned earlier that is located here, is also promoting the same kind of collaboration within the Central Asian Republic. So please do look at GIP's website for capacity building, introduction, networking, etc. We do cover all of the areas that Central Asia represents. Now, I know we're running a little tight on time, and I've been hinted at that, so I've got cut down a little bit on my final question for each of the panelists. Instead of 3 or 4 minutes, I'm going to give only 1 minute each to the panelists to ask just one quick question, is that what needs to be done, in your view, to increase the volumes of sustainable, for these kinds of investment in sustainable track? That's the subject that we've been talking about, sustainable finance. What needs to be done, in your view, to increase the volumes? 1 minute for each of the panelists. I'll start with my first one here.
Thank you, Anwar. Well, as I mentioned, we are working with Almaty Akimat on green bonds. So this work could be replicated with other Akimats and regional authorities to basically to satisfy infrastructure needs, which we discussed at the panel this morning. And the infrastructure needs are vast. So those investments, there's no reason why shouldn't they be green and sustainable. And kind of working with and setting this example with big issuers like Almaty Akimat and following with Astana and Shymkent and all others, I think is an important setting stone to broaden sort of the issuers base in Kazakhstan. Just
very good. Thank you. I'll go next to Natalia.
Да, я думаю, что для того, чтобы повысить объем устойчивого финансирования, мы прежде всего должны помогать компаниям частного бизнеса, малого, среднего бизнеса привлекать это финансирование. У компаний появляются проекты, и есть желание это делать. Не всегда хватает компетенций командам, не всегда достаточно, не всегда это легко с точки зрения операционной нагрузки. Поэтому я думаю, что мы просто должны помогать, практическую помощь оказывать частному бизнесу для выпуска таких проектов. Казахстанская фондовая биржа и многие участники рынка, банки, брокерские организации это делают. Ну и я думаю, что мы продолжим это делать, и наш рынок зеленых облигаций будет расти.
Thank you.
Yes, sustainability financing is in everyone's agenda worldwide. So I think from the perspective of development financial institutions and from the perspective of investment banks, sustainable instruments are very popular today. So I think there is no problem with increasing investments from their side, but the issue is related mainly with the corporate private investors. We need to, first of all, to increase their investments into sustainable instruments. We need to, of course, provide some legislative framework to provide these instruments with some legal status, first of all, especially in Uzbekistan. ESG products, sustainable instruments are just being developed, so that's why it's very crucial for the country. The second one, of course, we need to promote these instruments among investors, because even if we provide some legislative framework, without knowing what it is very hard to draw their attention to such kind of instruments, of course. And this third one, very important thing, is to provide some financial and non-financial incentives that can be, for example, tax exemptions or regulatory reliefs or procedure, for example, reliefs as well, to register such kind of instruments or maybe to deal with them. And of course, the last one, as we are in a way, Uzbekistan in a very high interest rate and currency volatile area, this is very crucial for the country to provide with some FX and the currency hedging options, because the country lacks such kind of instruments. And for a potential investor from abroad or from the regional investor, it would be very important to know that their investments are safe and hedged. So that's why I think this is also one of very important aspects. Thank you.
Thank you. Anurag?
easy to be the last one. I will try to be quick in a minute then. I think what Marat just said is very important for the redirection or the better balance between the tax incentives that we can be created or be reorganized for strategic sectors that need to be decarbonized in those countries, not just in Kazakhstan, but in Central Asia, in our perspective here as the EDB. Also, when we consider about subsidies, especially on the end point of the chain, which is on the client, on the consumer side, gradually moving that forward so you can tackle that. There are many very facets that you can consider that, but it should be also on the radar. From the legal standpoint, I think the countries are very well safe on that. I think we should consider, of course, the bond and debt market instruments that can be fostered even further. I don't personally believe we need like say a new label for, and that's also I think was the latest statement from ICMA and 2-3 years ago for transition finance. For instance, again, this topic very important for our bank and we think in the region. I think we have the already existing frameworks and the taxonomies already for that, so green, SLBs and SLEs and so on. But one key important point that I would consider for the really getting this influx to raise up is cooperation between the multilateral developed banks. So co-financing is extremely important. So we always look forward to foster even more this coordination, even between different mandates. So I think it's a cross-section of mandates that can be more harmonized. And there is also, of course, many initiatives, the G20 initiatives and more for calling for this more better coordination of the financial flows for sustainable markets. And that's also what I think is maybe or more crucial for Central Asian countries and specifically in Kazakhstan. Thank you.
Thank you. Key points. As a former central banker, I will take the liberty of giving my own input on how central banks should work also. You mentioned coordination, harmonization. And one of the outgrowths of global financial crisis was the central banks reacted in such a way they emphasized more macroprudential regulations to shift assets from the balance sheets from long-term to short-term. That needs to be reversed because infrastructure requires long-term financing. And how you allocate capital towards this effort to support this, you need to risk mitigants. How do you reduce the risk mitigants for this? Well, co-financing with multilaterals where less capital is required. So I think central banks globally, particularly in the developing countries and the Central Asian republics, need to amend their macroprudential regulations, particularly in support of those co-financing and sustainable finance. That's how you access capital from private sector as well as those asset managers that have trillions of dollars, the Brookfields, the BlackRocks, the Prudentials, and so forth. There's huge capital that is waiting to be invested, particularly with interest rates now coming down. That long-term sustainability is required by investors who are not much younger and more socially responsible, as opposed to their generational fathers who were looking at different returns. So that combination is what our central banks need to look at. And I'm saying it as a former central banker, and I've said this in Hong Kong and a couple of other places, that is important for this harmonization effort. So I took this a little extra liberty to give my own 2 bits, but thank you very much for the panelists. I don't think we have any time for audience questions. Do we? We have one hand, so I must ask Igel for that question since she is one of the architects of the GIP office here.
Hi everyone, thank you, Yasin. Just a quick question to Konrad, if I may. So it seems like we covered Kazakhstan, Uzbekistan today a lot, but we didn't touch upon Tajikistan, unfortunately. And it seems like it's one of the promising economies in the region, right? And I was wondering if, Tajikistan recently adopted a strategy on green economy, and the government is taking steps there to attract the green investment. And I was wondering what else needs to be done, what conditions should be met, so Eurasian Development Bank actually will increase its portfolio in Tajikistan in green projects. Thanks.
Thank you. Thank you for the question. Yes, Tajikistan is also, as the new strategic cycle of the bank, we're looking for growing our presence in those smaller economies, as we, if you will, we can say that. So ex-Russian Federation and Kazakhstan, the largest economies, are a block of 6 countries. Tajikistan, Kyrgyzstan also very importantly, and we look forward this next strategic cycle to foster more the investments shifting to those directions, so basically to those countries, is of course also a bit of challenge when we need to find those bankable projects. So what we're looking to do more is technical assistance to find out those good projects that we can also bear the risk and we can of course help to achieve the targets, especially on the climate sense. So the bank is also considering Tajikistan as one of the key leading points, also existing with the three, let's say the three in the countries in the region, taking 10 countries. We're currently doing a study in conjunction with the United Nations ESCAP. We're looking for Georgia, Tajikistan, and Kyrgyzstan. They have a legacy of hydropower generation installed capacity, but we also need to extend further other renewables as well in the country, specifically in Tajikistan. So the bank is looking forward to do that more, and also that's how I was saying here before, cooperation to find and get those projects, very good projects in the private sector, to be bankable and to bear the risk that we can be also the partners of choice for that endeavor. So the next strategic cycle is what we're looking to do more, not just Tajikistan, but also Kyrgyzstan, Armenia, Belarus, and the other smaller economies in our block of countries. Thank you.
Okay, very good. Thank you very much. I don't think we have any time for any more questions. I'm getting nods from my coordinators here that you've got to terminate this pretty quickly. This is a topic that we could talk on and on about. There's huge opportunities for investors for the next few decades, as we've heard, and you've got very talented people on this panel. You can knock on the door because cooperation, collaboration, education, awareness, harmonization, capacity building, all these are summed up in this panel. You've got great resource, and Natalia, you mentioned a couple of things which I think you're going to get a lot of people coming to tap on your door. Very good. Well, thank you very much for your attention, and thank you, panelists, for an excellent introduction.